Before we get into the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The lobby of Sterling Tower was the kind of place where Emily Carter's worn ballet flats felt like a crime against marble. She clutched her phone tighter, double-checking the address her roommate had texted her that morning. Floor 32, Hawthorne Estate Management. The position was for a live-in housekeeper at some wealthy family's home in Greenwich, Connecticut. The pay was triple what she'd been making at the diner, enough to finally catch up on her late father's medical debt, and maybe, just maybe, finish her architecture degree. 26 years old, and Emily felt ancient. 3 years ago, she'd been a promising graduate student with a portfolio full of innovative designs and a future that sparkled with possibility. Then her father's cancer diagnosis had turned her world into a nightmare of hospital bills and insurance denials. She dropped out to work double shifts, watching her dreams shrink with every rent payment and every call from debt collectors. He died anyway, 6 months ago, leaving her with a grief so heavy she could barely breathe, and debts that would take a decade to clear. But she wasn't broken. Not yet. Emily squared her shoulders and stepped into the elevator, smoothing down her thrift store blazer. The housekeeper position wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work with good pay and free room and board. She'd learned long ago that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The elevator climbed swiftly, her reflection multiplying in the polished brass walls. 30, 31, 32. The doors opened with a soft chime onto a corridor that smelled like expensive leather and fresh flowers. Emily checked the suite numbers, turning right toward the address she'd memorized. Hawthorne Estate Management should be at the end of the hall. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate, asking how the interview was going, and Emily smiled despite her nerves. She was typing a response when a man in an expensive suit brushed past her, juggling his phone and a leather briefcase. The collision was minor, but it sent Emily's phone skittering across the polished floor and her papers flying in every direction. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered documents. The man muttered something that might have been an apology and disappeared around the corner without stopping. Emily shook her head, collecting her resume and reference letters. Rich people, she thought, with a mixture of annoyance and resignation. Some of them acted like the rest of the world was just inconveniently placed furniture. Flustered and now running 2 minutes late, Emily grabbed what she thought were all her papers and hurried toward what she assumed was the correct door. The nameplate read, "Executive Offices" in understated gold lettering. Close enough, she figured. Estate management executives, business executives. It was all the same world of money and power that she was about to serve. She knocked twice and heard a deep voice call, "Enter." The office beyond was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of Manhattan that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive wood, the kind of minimalist luxury that screamed old money. Behind a massive desk sat a man who made Emily forget every carefully rehearsed greeting she'd prepared. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that looked professionally styled, even though it was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. His suit was charcoal gray and fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body, which it probably had been. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold, pale green and sharp as broken glass, currently staring at her with an expression somewhere between irritation and assessment. "You're late," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that probably made boardrooms fall silent. "I specifically requested punctuality in the contract." Emily blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm actually only 2 minutes late. There was a small accident in the hallway. 2 minutes is still late, and I don't appreciate excuses on your first day." "First day?" Emily's confusion deepened. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm here for an interview, not a first day. The housekeeper position with Hawthorne Estate Management." The man's frown deepened. He stood, revealing impressive height, and walked around the desk with the predatory grace of someone used to commanding rooms. "Housekeeper? What are you talking about? We have a signed contract for a completely different position." "Contract?" Emily's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I haven't signed anything. I'm here to interview for a job." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His eyes narrowed as he studied her face with uncomfortable intensity. Emily Rose Carter, 26 years old, degree in architecture from Columbia, originally from Portland, Maine. Did I miss anything? Emily's portfolio slipped from her nerveless fingers for the second time that morning. "How do you know all that?" "Because, Miss Carter, according to these documents, you signed a contract 3 days ago agreeing to a very specific arrangement." He moved back to his desk and held up a folder thick with paperwork. "An arrangement that has nothing to do with housekeeping. That's impossible. I never signed anything. I only heard about this job yesterday from my roommate." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his features. He flipped open the folder, scanning the documents with increasing concentration. "This makes no sense. Every detail matches. Your name, your age, your background, even your financial situation." Emily crept closer despite her confusion, peering at the papers he was holding. There, in black and white, was her name on what looked like an incredibly official contract. But the terms made no sense. Live-in companion, social engagements, public appearances, and at the bottom, a compensation figure that made her eyes water. $500,000 for 1 year of service. "This is insane," she whispered. "I didn't sign this. I've never seen this document before in my life." The man, she still didn't know his name, looked up from the papers with an expression that might have been disappointment or relief. She couldn't tell which. "So you're telling me you're not here to fulfill this contract?" "I'm telling you, I'm here for a housekeeper interview because I need to pay off my father's medical debt and maybe, eventually, finish my degree." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of the city 42 floors below. The man's expression shifted from commanding to calculating, and Emily didn't like the new gleam in his eyes. "Interesting," he said slowly. "So you're not the woman I was expecting. You're in the wrong office, and you desperately need money." "I wouldn't say desperately," Emily protested, then reconsidered. "Okay, yes, desperately. But I'm here for legitimate work, not whatever this contract is about." "What if I told you this contract could solve all your financial problems in a single year?" Emily took a step back. "What exactly does this contract entail?" The man returned to his desk, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather chairs opposite. After a moment's hesitation, Emily sat, perching on the edge like she might need to run at any moment. "My name is Nathan Sterling," he began, his voice shifting to what she recognized as his business tone. "I'm the CEO of Sterling International, and I'm currently in a complicated situation that requires a very specific solution." "Okay," Emily said carefully. "My grandmother, the majority shareholder of Sterling International, recently updated her will. In order for me to maintain control of the company, I need to be married by my 32nd birthday, which is in exactly 4 weeks. Emily's eyebrows shot up. "That's archaic. That's family business. My grandmother has very traditional views about stability and commitment. She believes a married man is a responsible man." "So you're looking for a fake wife?" "I'm looking for a contractual partner in a mutually beneficial arrangement. Someone who needs money and is willing to play a role for a specified period of time. Emily stared at him, her mind reeling. This was absolutely crazy. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not to broke architecture dropouts in worn-out shoes. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about business, Miss Carter. The woman I had arranged to fulfill this contract has apparently disappeared, and I'm running out of time. You need money. I need a wife. It's actually quite simple. It's insane. Insane, but profitable. Nathan's smile was sharp, businesslike. 1 year of your life, public appearances, social functions, playing the devoted wife for my grandmother and the board of directors. In private, we maintain completely separate lives. At the end of the year, you receive your payment and walk away with enough money to clear your debts and finish your degree. Possibly even start your own firm. The last part hit Emily like a physical blow. Her own firm. It had been her dream since she was 12 years old, sketching buildings in the margins of her school notebooks. A dream she'd given up on the day her father's doctor had used the word terminal. I can't just marry a stranger, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why not? It's a business transaction, nothing more. No different than any other job, just better compensated. It's completely different. Marriage is supposed to be about love and partnership and fairy tales. Nathan's voice held a hint of mockery. In my world, Miss Carter, marriage is about alliances, assets, and strategic positioning. At least this arrangement is honest about what it is. Emily wanted to argue, wanted to storm out of this office and find the actual housekeeper job she'd come here for. But her mind was already calculating numbers. $500,000. That would pay off every cent of her father's debt, fund the rest of her degree, and leave enough to live on while she built a portfolio and looked for work in her actual field. 1 year of her life in exchange for her future back. If I were to even consider this, and I'm not saying I am, she said carefully, what would be expected of me? Nathan's smile widened slightly. Smart question. You'd move into my penthouse apartment, attend social functions as my wife, convince my grandmother and the board that we're genuinely in love. In private, you'd have your own room, your own space, and complete freedom to do whatever you want with your time. And after a year, quiet divorce, settlement paid in full, and you disappear back to whatever life you choose. We'd cite irreconcilable differences, and you'd be free. It sounded too easy, which meant it probably wasn't. Emily studied Nathan's face, trying to read past the cool businessman exterior. Why me? You could hire an actress, find someone who actually wants to do this. Because actresses are dramatic and unpredictable. Because women who want to marry billionaires often have trouble remembering it's temporary. And because you, Miss Carter, walked into my office by complete accident, which means you're not connected to my social circle and won't have complicated expectations about what this arrangement means. You mean I'm safe because I'm nobody. I mean you're perfect because you're real. You're educated, articulate, and clearly capable of taking care of yourself. Plus, you have genuine motivation to see this through without complications. Emily closed her eyes, trying to think past the numbers spinning in her head. This was crazy. This was dangerous. This was possibly the worst idea she'd ever heard. But it was also a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman, and she was so tired of drowning. I need time to think about this. Unfortunately, time is a luxury neither of us has. I need to present my fiancé to my grandmother this weekend. It's now or never, Miss Carter. The words felt like a trap closing around her. Emily opened her eyes and found Nathan watching her with the patience of a predator who knew his prey was cornered. She thought about her father's grave, about the collection notices stuffed in her kitchen drawer, about the half-finished architectural models gathering dust in her closet. "If I agree," she heard herself say, "I want everything in writing, every expectation, every detail, every cent of compensation clearly documented. Naturally, I'll have my lawyers draft a comprehensive contract this afternoon. And I want to meet your grandmother before I commit to anything." Nathan's eyebrows rose. "That's not typically how these arrangements work." "Then maybe you should have found your original bride," Emily shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. For a moment, something that looked like respect flickered in Nathan's eyes. "Fair enough. We'll visit her tomorrow. But I should warn you, she's incredibly perceptive and not easily fooled. Then we better make our story convincing. Indeed we better, future Mrs. Sterling." The name sent an unexpected shiver through Emily. In less than an hour, her life had gone from desperate and predictable to absolutely insane. She was agreeing to marry a stranger for money, the very definition of everything she'd been raised to believe was wrong. But as she signed the preliminary agreement that afternoon, surrounded by lawyers and suits that cost more than her car, Emily reminded herself that sometimes survival required compromise. Sometimes desperate situations called for desperate measures. She just hoped she wouldn't regret this for the rest of her life. Nathan Sterling's penthouse apartment was located in a building so exclusive that Emily had to sign a non-disclosure agreement just to enter the private elevator. As they rode up to the 48th floor the next evening, she tried not to stare at the marble walls and crystal accents that probably cost more than most people's mortgages. "Nervous?" Nathan asked, noting her white-knuckled grip on her purse. "Terrified," Emily admitted. "I'm about to lie to your grandmother about being madly in love with you when I've known you for exactly 26 hours. 27 hours and 18 minutes, Nathan corrected. "And you don't have to lie. Just don't volunteer the complete truth." "That's the same thing." "It's really not." The elevator opened directly into Nathan's apartment, and Emily forgot to breathe. The space was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that looked like art installations. The view stretched across Manhattan, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness. "This is where I'll be living?" she asked, her voice coming out smaller than intended. "Yes. Your room is down that hallway, second door on the left, fully furnished, private bathroom, walk-in closet. My assistant had it prepared today." Emily walked slowly through the main living area, taking in details that spoke of wealth she could barely comprehend. Original artwork on the walls, a grand piano by the windows, a kitchen with appliances that probably required advanced degrees to operate. "Nathan," she said, turning to face him, "I don't belong here. I don't know how to live like this." He'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, looking slightly more human than the cold businessman from his office. "You'll learn. My staff will help you with anything you need. Your staff. Housekeeper, personal chef, driver. They all signed comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. Your secret is safe." The reminder that this was all a performance made Emily's stomach twist. She wasn't really going to be Mrs. Sterling, mistress of this impossible apartment. She was an employee playing a role, no different than an actress on a stage. "We should go," Nathan said, checking his watch. "Grandmother expects us for dinner at 8, and she hates lateness even more than I do." The drive to the Sterling family estate took 40 minutes, heading north into Connecticut, where old money built houses that looked like museums. Nathan's grandmother lived in a sprawling colonial mansion, surrounded by gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. "Last chance to back out," Nathan said, as they pulled up the circular drive. Emily thought about the contract sitting in her new room, about the first payment that would hit her account once they were officially engaged. "Let's do this." The front door opened before they could knock, revealing an elderly woman who looked nothing like Emily had expected. Margaret Sterling was small and elegant, with white hair perfectly coiffed and sharp blue eyes that reminded Emily of Nathan's intensity. But where Nathan was cold and calculating, his grandmother radiated warmth. "Nathan, darling." She embraced her grandson with genuine affection before turning to Emily with undisguised curiosity. "And this must be Emily. My dear, you're even lovelier than Nathan described." "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling. It's wonderful to meet you. Please, call me Margaret. We're going to be family, after all." The word family hit Emily harder than she'd expected. This wasn't just about fooling a board of directors. This was about lying to a kind old woman who clearly loved her grandson deeply. Inside, the house was beautiful in a lived-in way that Nathan's sleek penthouse wasn't. Family photos covered every surface, comfortable furniture invited people to sit and stay, and the smell of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. Over dinner, Margaret asked questions that felt like gentle interrogations. How did they meet? What attracted Emily to Nathan? When did they know it was serious? Nathan answered smoothly, weaving facts into a narrative that satisfied his grandmother's curiosity without containing actual lies. Emily followed his lead, discovering that he was an excellent storyteller when he wanted to be. So Emily walked into my office, and I knew immediately that she was different from anyone I'd ever met, Nathan said, his hand reaching across the table to cover hers. She was honest, direct, completely unimpressed by wealth or status. It was refreshing. That part was true, Emily realized. She hadn't known who he was when she'd walked into his office, hadn't been intimidated by his money or his reputation. She'd just been annoyed that he'd thought she was late. "And you, Emily?" Margaret asked. "When did you know Nathan was special?" Emily looked at Nathan, at the way he was playing his part so perfectly, and decided on honesty. "When he stopped being the intimidating CEO and showed me the person underneath, when I realized there was more to him than the cold businessman everyone sees." Something shifted in Nathan's expression, a crack in his carefully maintained facade. For just a moment, he looked surprised, vulnerable even, like she'd said something that touched a nerve he hadn't expected. "Love at first sight?" Margaret asked with a romantic smile. "Something like that," Emily replied, still holding Nathan's gaze. After dinner, Margaret insisted on showing Emily the family photo albums, pointing out baby pictures of Nathan that made the stern CEO blush. "He was such a serious child," Margaret explained. "Always reading, always thinking. His parents were so busy climbing social ladders that they barely noticed they had a son." "Grandmother," Nathan warned, but there was affection in his voice rather than real annoyance. "What? Emily should know what she's getting into. This boy spent his whole childhood trying to prove he was worthy of attention. Maybe now he'll finally understand he deserves to be loved just for who he is." The comment hung heavy in the air, revealing pain that Emily hadn't expected. She looked at Nathan and saw past the wealthy CEO to the lonely child he must have been, desperate for love from parents too self-absorbed to notice. "I think he's pretty wonderful," Emily heard herself say, and was surprised to realize she meant it. Margaret beamed. "I knew you were perfect for him the moment I saw you." As they drove back to the city, the car was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the occasional sound of traffic. Emily stared out the window, processing the evening's revelations. "Your grandmother is lovely," she said finally. "She is. She's also the only person in my family who ever gave a damn about me." The admission was quiet, but heavy with unspoken history. Emily turned to look at Nathan's profile in the passing streetlights. "Your parents really ignored you? They had me because it was expected, raised me because it was required. But they never actually wanted to be parents. They were too busy positioning themselves in society to notice they had a child who needed them. I'm sorry." Nathan shrugged, but Emily could see the tension in his shoulders. "It taught me early that emotion is weakness, that relationships are just transactions with prettier wrapping. Is that what you really believe? It's what I've observed. My parents' marriage was a strategic alliance. Most marriages in my social circle are about combining assets or maintaining status. At least our arrangement is honest about what it is. Emily wanted to argue, to tell him that real love existed, that not all relationships were cold transactions. But looking at this man who spoke about affection like a foreign concept, she realized he might be too damaged to believe her. Your grandmother doesn't see it that way. She clearly believes in love. My grandmother is a romantic who sees what she wants to see. Nathan glanced at Emily, something unreadable in his expression. But I'm glad she likes you. It makes this easier. Does it? Because lying to her feels awful. You weren't lying when you said I was wonderful. That sounded genuine. Heat flooded Emily's cheeks. I was playing my part. Were you? Nathan's voice was soft, questioning. Because for a moment there, it felt real. Emily didn't know how to respond to that, so she turned back to the window and watched the city lights blur past. But she could feel Nathan's gaze on her, could sense the same confusion she was feeling reflected in him. This wasn't supposed to feel real. It was supposed to be simple, a business transaction that benefited both of them. But somewhere between Margaret's warm welcome and Nathan's unexpected vulnerability, the lines had started to blur. Back at the penthouse, they stood awkwardly in the main living area, neither quite sure of the protocol for fake marriages. Your room is fully stocked, Nathan said, gesturing down the hall. Clothes, toiletries, everything you should need. If something's missing, just let my assistant know. Thank you. This is all very generous. It's just business. But it didn't feel like business when he looked at her like that, with an expression that held curiosity and something that might have been longing. Emily reminded herself firmly that Nathan Sterling was damaged and emotionally unavailable, that this was all an act, that getting confused about the reality of their situation was dangerous. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Emily. And thank you for tonight, for being kind to my grandmother, for not running when you realized how complicated this was going to be. The night's still young, Emily replied, trying for lightness. Nathan almost smiled. Indeed it is. In her new room, Emily changed into the expensive pajamas that had been left for her and climbed into a bed that probably cost more than her college tuition. She should have felt uncomfortable in this unfamiliar luxury, should have been kept awake by the strangeness of her new situation. Instead, she fell asleep thinking about the vulnerability in Nathan's eyes when he'd talked about his childhood, and the way her heart had twisted with unexpected sympathy. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Nathan's assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Claire, coordinated everything from the wedding to Emily's new wardrobe. She was fitted for designer gowns, taught the basics of high society etiquette, and briefed on the key people in Nathan's business and social circles. Remember, Mrs. Sterling, Claire said during one of their sessions, you're not just Nathan's wife. You're a representative of the Sterling family legacy. Every appearance, every conversation, every social media post reflects on the company. The pressure was intense, but Emily discovered she had a knack for the role. Years of working in customer service had taught her how to read people, how to adapt her personality to different situations. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at bad jokes from Nathan's business associates, and played the devoted wife so convincingly that even she sometimes forgot it was an act. What surprised her most was how easy it became to be with Nathan. In public, they were the perfect couple, finishing each other's sentences and sharing private smiles. But in private, they developed an unexpected friendship. Nathan worked late most nights, but when he came home, he often found Emily sketching at the dining room table, working on architectural designs that she hadn't touched in years. "What are you designing?" he asked one evening, looking over her shoulder at her drawings. Nothing real, just playing with ideas. May I? Emily handed him the sketch, watching nervously as he studied it. Nathan looked at her drawings with the same intensity he brought to everything, his eyes tracing the lines of her proposed community center design. "This is brilliant," he said finally. "The way you've integrated green space with the building structure, the accessibility considerations. Emily, this is genuinely innovative work." Heat flooded her cheeks at the unexpected praise. "It's just a hobby now." "It shouldn't be. You have real talent. Talent doesn't pay the bills." Nathan set down the sketch and looked at her directly. "What if it could? Sterling International has a real estate development division. We're always looking for fresh architectural perspectives." "Nathan, no, I'm not taking charity." "It's not charity if you're actually good, which you are. Think about it. After this year, you'll need a career. Why not one you're actually passionate about?" The offer was tempting, almost painfully so, but Emily had learned to be wary of gifts that seemed too generous. "Let's just get through the wedding first." Fair enough. But the offer stands. Moments like that made Emily forget that their arrangement was temporary, that Nathan Sterling was her employer rather than her partner. He was thoughtful in unexpected ways, remembering that she liked her coffee with too much cream, making sure the chef prepared vegetarian options because she'd mentioned once that she didn't eat meat. Small gestures that felt personal rather than contractual. The night before the wedding, Emily couldn't sleep. She stood by the massive windows overlooking the city, watching the lights and trying to quiet the panic rising in her chest. Tomorrow, she was marrying a man she'd known for less than a month, committing to a year of pretending to be someone she wasn't. Can't sleep either? Emily turned to find Nathan standing in the doorway of her room, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt that made him look younger, more approachable. "Just nervous," she admitted. "So am I." "You?" The unflappable Nathan Sterling is nervous? He walked to stand beside her at the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Tomorrow, I'm marrying someone I barely know and lying to everyone I care about. That's terrifying. We could still call it off. Tell your grandmother the truth." "No." Nathan's response was immediate and firm. "She has a weak heart. The shock could kill her. And honestly, I don't want to disappoint her. She's the one person who always believed I was capable of something more than corporate success." Emily studied his reflection in the glass. "You are capable of more. You're kind and thoughtful and more human than you pretend to be." Nathan turned to face her directly. "You don't really know me, Emily." "Maybe not. But I know enough to see that the cold CEO persona is just armor. The real you is softer than you want anyone to see. And what makes you such an expert on the real me? The way you talk about your grandmother, the interest you show in my architecture, the fact that you're standing here at midnight, admitting you're scared instead of hiding behind your usual confidence." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "This is getting complicated." "It doesn't have to be. We just have to remember what this really is." "And what is it, Emily?" The question felt loaded with meaning she didn't quite understand. Emily found herself stepping closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his expression. "A business arrangement that benefits both of us." "Right. Just business." But the way he was looking at her didn't feel like business, and the way her heart was racing had nothing to do with financial transactions. For a dangerous moment, Emily thought he might kiss her, might finally cross the careful line they'd been maintaining. Instead, Nathan stepped back, the familiar walls sliding back into place. "We should both try to get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." "Nathan?" "Yes. Thank you. For everything. for giving me a chance to rebuild my life, for being kinder than I expected, for not making this as awful as it could have been. Something soft flickered in Nathan's expression. You're welcome. And Emily? Thank you too, for agreeing to this insanity, for being patient with my family, for not treating me like just another wealthy employer. After he left, Emily lay in bed, replaying their conversation. The lines between their arrangement and something real were becoming dangerously blurred. She was starting to care about Nathan Sterling as more than just her ticket to financial freedom. And that was the most dangerous thing she could do. Because in 11 months and a few weeks, this would all be over. And falling for a man who didn't believe in real love was a heartbreak waiting to happen. The wedding took place in the Sterling family's private chapel in the Hamptons, a small but elegant ceremony attended by close family and Nathan's key business associates. Emily wore a custom gown that fit her like a dream, all silk and delicate lace, feeling like she was playing dress-up in someone else's fantasy life. As she walked down the aisle toward Nathan, her arm linked with Margaret's because her own father was gone, Emily tried to focus on the practical aspects of what was happening. This was a performance, an elaborate play they were staging for an audience. But when she reached the altar, and Nathan took her hands in his, the look in his eyes made her forget all her carefully rehearsed reminders. "You're breathtaking," he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. "So are you," Emily replied, and meant it. Nathan looked perfect in his tuxedo, tall and commanding, but with a softness around his eyes that hadn't been there when they'd first met. Over the past weeks, she'd watched him gradually relax around her, the stern CEO persona melting away to reveal someone more vulnerable underneath. The ceremony itself was traditional and surprisingly moving. Nathan's voice was steady as he recited vows they'd written together, promises that sounded heartfelt, despite being carefully crafted for maximum emotional impact. When it came Emily's turn, she found herself speaking the words with unexpected sincerity. "I promise to stand beside you, to support your dreams, to be your partner in whatever challenges we face," she said, surprised by the emotion in her own voice. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan cupped her face in both hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The guests, the pretense, the contract, locked in Nathan's office safe. There was only the gentle pressure of his lips and the surprising warmth in his touch. When they broke apart, Nathan's eyes held the same confusion she felt. This wasn't supposed to feel real. The reception was held in the estate's gardens, transformed into a fairy tale setting with string lights and white roses. Emily played her role perfectly, smiling for photos, thanking guests for their congratulations, and laughing at Nathan's business associates' jokes. But she was hyper-aware of Nathan's constant presence, his hand on her waist, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. During their first dance, Emily finally allowed herself to relax into his embrace. They swayed to a romantic ballad while their guests watched with approval, and for those few minutes, she let herself pretend this was all real. "You're an excellent dancer," she observed. "Boarding school requirement, along with fencing and polo. Such a hard life." "You have no idea," Nathan replied, but there was humor in his voice rather than bitterness. As the song ended, Margaret approached them with tears in her eyes. "You two are perfect together. I've never seen Nathan look at anyone the way he looks at you, Emily." The comment made Emily's chest tighten. If only Margaret knew the truth, that the love in her grandson's eyes was just skilled acting, that this whole perfect day was built on a foundation of lies and legal contracts. That night, back at the penthouse, the awkwardness of their situation became impossible to ignore. They were legally married now, husband and wife in the eyes of the law and society. but they remained essentially strangers, playing roles for an audience. "I had your things moved into the master bedroom," Nathan said, hovering in the living room, like he wasn't sure where to stand. Emily's eyes widened. "What? Why?" "The household staff will talk if we're sleeping in separate rooms. We need to maintain the illusion even with people who work for us." "Nathan, the contract said separate rooms, private lives." "The contract didn't account for how closely my staff pays attention to details." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Emily had learned meant he was stressed. "Look, the room is enormous. There's a sitting area, multiple closets. We can divide the space and maintain our privacy. And the bed? King-sized. You'll barely know I'm there." Emily wanted to argue, wanted to insist on maintaining the boundaries they'd established. But she could see the logic in his reasoning, and she was too tired from the long day to fight about logistics. "Fine. But we establish ground rules, boundaries. This doesn't change the nature of our arrangement." "Agreed." The master bedroom was indeed enormous, with a seating area that included a couch and chairs, a massive walk-in closet that had been divided into his and hers sections, and a bathroom with both a soaking tub and a rain shower. The bed itself was large enough that 2 people could sleep in it and never touch. They established a routine that first night that would become familiar over the following weeks. Nathan disappeared into the bathroom first, while Emily changed in the walk-in closet. He emerged in pajama pants and a t-shirt, heading to his side of the bed with a book. Emily took her turn in the bathroom, then climbed into her side of the bed with her own reading material. They lay there in the darkness, carefully maintaining the space between them, both hyper-aware of the other's presence. "This is weird," Emily finally said. "Extremely weird," Nathan agreed. "We're married, but not really married. Living together, but trying to pretend we're not. Sharing a bed, but determined not to touch each other." "When you put it like that, it sounds completely insane." "That's because it is completely insane." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it? Agreeing to this?" Emily considered the question carefully. "No. My mother's medical debt is cleared. I'm back in school part-time studying architecture, and I have opportunities I never would have had otherwise. This arrangement has been good for me. But it's more complicated than I expected. The lines between what's real and what's performance keep getting blurry. I know what you mean." Emily turned her head on the pillow to look at his profile in the darkness. "Do you? Because sometimes I think you have everything perfectly compartmentalized in that brilliant, calculating mind of yours. Is that what you think? That I'm cold and calculating? I think you try to be. I think you use logic and control as protection against feeling things that scare you." Nathan turned to face her, and in the dim light coming through the windows, Emily could see the conflict in his expression. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I've spent so long building walls that I don't know how to let people in anymore. Maybe you just need someone patient enough to wait for you to open the door. Is that what you're doing? Being patient? I don't know what I'm doing, Nathan. This whole situation is so far outside my experience that I'm just making it up as I go." Nathan reached out slowly, like he was giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. "You're doing better than making it up. You're excelling at it. Even Margaret believes we're genuinely in love. And what about you? What do you believe?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Nathan's hand stilled against her cheek, his eyes searching hers in the darkness. "I believe," he said slowly, "that you're the most confusing, frustrating, and interesting person I've ever met. I believe that somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like just an arrangement. And I believe that terrifies me." Emily's breath caught. "Nathan. But I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to want something without trying to control it, without turning it into a transaction. And I don't want to do that to you. So what do? We stick to the plan. 1 year, exactly as we agreed. And we try very hard not to make this more complicated than it already is. It was the logical answer, the safe answer. But as Nathan withdrew his hand and turned back to his side of the bed, Emily felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the space between them, to tell him that maybe complicated wasn't such a bad thing. Instead, she turned to her own side and stared at the city lights, trying to ignore the fact that her heart was doing exactly what she'd promised. Herself it wouldn't do. She was falling for Nathan Sterling, and there was no contract clause that could protect her from that heartbreak. The weeks that followed established a pattern that felt increasingly like real marriage, despite their best efforts to maintain emotional distance. Nathan still worked late most nights, but he'd started coming home for dinner when he could, interested in the architecture courses Emily was taking online and the designs she was developing. "This is your community center project?" he asked one evening, studying the renderings she'd spread across the dining table. "My thesis project, actually, the one I never got to finish." "Why a community center?" Emily set down her pencil, considering the question. "Because architecture should serve people, not just look impressive. I grew up in a neighborhood where the local community center was the only safe space for kids. It provided after-school programs, helped with homework, taught life skills. That building changed lives, including mine. I wanted to design spaces that could do the same thing for other communities." Nathan was quiet, studying her designs with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "This is really good, Emily. The way you've integrated different program spaces, the accessibility features, the sustainable design elements. Have you thought about actually building this? With what resources? I'm a dropout with no portfolio and no professional connections." "You have connections now. Sterling International's development division is launching a corporate responsibility initiative. We're looking for projects that combine social impact with solid design. This could fit perfectly." Emily's heart skipped. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious about business. If your designs hold up to technical review, I see no reason why we couldn't move forward with this." "Nathan, I can't let you do that. It would look like favoritism. It would look like my company supporting innovative design from a talented architect, which happens to be exactly what it is." The offer was tempting, almost painfully so, but Emily had learned to be wary of gifts that seemed too generous, especially from Nathan. Every kindness from him made it harder to remember that their arrangement was temporary, that in less than a year they would divorce and go their separate ways. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Emily, this isn't charity or favoritism. Your work stands on its own merit." That night, they attended a gallery opening together, one of the endless social functions that came with being Mrs. Sterling. Emily had gotten better at these events, learning how to make small talk with people whose jewelry cost more than her previous annual salary. But she still felt like an imposter playing dress-up. The evening took an uncomfortable turn when they encountered Marcus Kane, Nathan's cousin, and one of his chief rivals in the family business. Marcus was handsome in a polished way, with perfect hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if it isn't the newlyweds," Marcus said, approaching with a champagne flute and barely concealed hostility. "Congratulations on your whirlwind romance, cousin. So convenient that you found true love just in time to meet grandmother's deadline." "Marcus," Nathan's voice carried a warning. "What?" "I'm just admiring the timing. 3 months ago, you were telling everyone that marriage was a trap for fools. Now here you are, completely devoted." Marcus turned to Emily with a smile that made her skin crawl. "You must be quite special to have changed his mind," so dramatically, Emily. Sometimes the right person comes along when you least expect it, Emily replied carefully, repeating the line they'd practiced. Indeed. And sometimes people marry for reasons that have nothing to do with love. Marcus's smile sharpened. But I'm sure that's not the case here. After all, what could a broke architecture student possibly offer a billionaire besides pure, authentic affection? The barb hit its mark. Heat flooded Emily's cheeks as she realized how transparent their arrangement might appear to someone looking for flaws. Nathan moved closer, his hand tightening on her waist. Careful, Marcus. You're talking about my wife. Of course, my apologies. But Marcus's eyes held no real remorse. I'm sure your marriage is completely legitimate and will last well beyond grandmother's requirements. After Marcus walked away, the evening felt tainted. Emily could feel other guests watching them with new speculation, could sense whispers following them through the gallery. In the car ride home, the tension was thick enough to cut. He knows, Emily said finally. He suspects. There's a difference. Is there? Because it felt like he could see right through us. Nathan stared out the window, his jaw tight. Marcus has always been good at finding weaknesses and exploiting them. It's what makes him dangerous. And I'm your weakness now. Nathan started, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. The arrangement puts you in a vulnerable position. I should have anticipated this. That night, Emily lay awake long after Nathan had fallen asleep, listening to his quiet breathing from the other side of the bed. Marcus's words echoed in her mind, reminding her that their entire relationship was built on deception. No matter how real it sometimes felt, no matter how much she was starting to care for Nathan, the foundation was false. And false foundations always crumbled eventually. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Margaret had collapsed at her bridge club and been rushed to the hospital. Nathan received the call while they were having breakfast, and Emily watched the color drain from his face as he listened to the doctor's report. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said, already moving toward the door. I'm coming with you, Emily said, grabbing her purse. You don't have to. This wasn't part of our agreement. Emily caught his arm, stopping him. Some things are more important than agreements. She's your grandmother, and she's been nothing but kind to me. I'm coming. At the hospital, they found Margaret looking frail against the white sheets, but her eyes lit up when they entered together. My favorite couple, she said weakly. I was hoping you'd come. They spent hours by her bedside, Emily reading aloud from Margaret's favorite books, while Nathan handled business calls in the hallway. When visiting hours ended, Margaret asked to speak with Emily privately. He loves you, you know, the old woman said once Nathan had stepped out. Emily's heart clenched. Mrs. Sterling. Margaret! Don't try to deny it. I've watched that boy build walls around his heart his entire life. But with you, the walls come down. He may not have said the words yet, but he loves you. Tears stung Emily's eyes. It's complicated. Love always is. But some things are worth fighting for. Margaret reached out to take Emily's hand. Promise me something. When he finally realizes what he's feeling, don't let his fear push you away. He's going to panic, going to try to convince himself and you that this is just the arrangement you agreed to. But you'll know better. Margaret, I can't promise that. We have an agreement, a timeline. Forget the timeline. Fight for him, Emily. He deserves someone who'll fight for him. The conversation haunted Emily as they drove home that evening. Nathan was quiet, his worry for Margaret written clearly on his face, despite his attempts to maintain his usual control. She's going to be okay, Emily said softly. Is she? The doctors aren't optimistic about her long-term prognosis. Then we make sure the time she has left is filled with happiness. We give her the love story she believes in. Nathan pulled the car over suddenly, his hands gripping the steering wheel. I can't do this. Can't do what? Pretend anymore. Lie to her. Lie to everyone. Lie to myself. He turned to face Emily, and she was shocked to see tears in his eyes. Do you know what it's like to watch the only person who ever really loved me dying, while knowing she's dying happy because I'm lying to her? Nathan. And the worst part? The absolute worst part is that it's not even entirely a lie anymore. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being part of an arrangement and became someone I actually care about. Someone I look forward to seeing at the end of the day. Someone who makes me want to be better than the cold, calculating bastard everyone thinks I am. Emily's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying this is a disaster. I'm saying I hired you to play a role, and instead, you've become someone I can't imagine my life without. I'm saying that in 8 months, when this arrangement ends, the thought of you walking away feels like it might actually kill me. Then don't let me walk away. It's not that simple. You signed up for a temporary arrangement, not a real marriage to a man who doesn't know how to love properly. Emily unbuckled her seatbelt and shifted to face him fully. Maybe you don't know how to love the way you think you're supposed to, but the way you take care of your grandmother, the way you encouraged my architecture, the way you protect me from people like Marcus, that's love, Nathan. It might not look like the romance novels version, but it's real. You don't understand. I'll disappoint you. I'll turn our relationship into something cold and transactional because that's all I know how to do. Or maybe I'll teach you that love doesn't have to be perfect or poetic. Maybe it can be two complicated people figuring it out together. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. Why would you want that? You could finish your degree, take the settlement, find someone normal who knows how to do relationships properly. Because normal is boring. Because you're brilliant and complicated and frustrating in the best possible way. Because somewhere between signing that contract and now, I fell completely in love with you. The words hung between them, impossible to take back. Nathan's expression cycled through shock, hope, and fear in rapid succession. Emily, you can't mean that. Why not? Because it wasn't part of the plan? Because it's inconvenient? Too bad. I fell in love with you anyway. This is insane. Welcome to my world. I've been living in insane for months. Nathan laughed, a real sound of surprise and relief. Then, before Emily could second-guess her confession, he pulled her close and kissed her with a desperation that made her heart race. This wasn't the performative kiss from their wedding or the careful pecks they'd shared at social functions. This was real, raw, and full of all the feelings they'd been carefully avoiding. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I don't know how to do this. I'll probably mess it up constantly, but I love you. We'll figure it out together. Together, Nathan repeated, like he was testing how the word felt. I like the sound of that. They sat in the parked car for a long time, holding each other while traffic passed around them, both trying to process how their careful arrangement had transformed into something real and terrifying and beautiful. The decision to transform their arrangement into a real marriage wasn't a single moment of clarity, but rather a gradual shift that happened over the following weeks. They didn't tear up the contract or make grand declarations. Instead, they simply stopped pretending that what they felt wasn't real. The physical distance they'd carefully maintained in their shared bed disappeared naturally. Emily would wake to find Nathan's arm draped across her waist, or she'd drift off with her head on his shoulder. They started having breakfast together every morning instead of Nathan rushing out before dawn, and dinner became a daily ritual where they talked about their days and made each other laugh. This is what I missed by never having a real relationship, Nathan said one evening as they cooked together in the massive kitchen. This comfortable domesticity. I always thought it would be boring, but with you, it's the best part of my day. Emily smiled, stealing a bite of the pasta he was making. That's because you're doing it with the right person. With the wrong person, domesticity is torture. How did you get so wise about relationships when you've never been in a serious one either? I watched a lot of romantic comedies during my broke, lonely years. They laughed together, and Emily marveled at how natural this felt. The man she'd married in a calculated business arrangement had become her best friend, her partner, the person she wanted to share everything with. Margaret's health improved slowly, and her joy at their obvious happiness was palpable. "I knew it," she said during one of their visits. "I knew you two just needed time to stop fighting what you felt." "You're too perceptive for your own good," Nathan replied, but he was smiling. "Someone has to be, since you're both stubborn as mules. Now tell me, when are you going to give me great-grandchildren to spoil?" Emily choked on her tea, while Nathan's eyes went wide. "Grandmother, we've barely been married 3 months." "Exactly. You're wasting time. I'm not getting any younger." "You're also not allowed to stress yourself with baby planning," Nathan said firmly. "Doctor's orders." But later that evening, as they lay in bed, Nathan brought it up again. "Would you want children? Eventually, I mean. Not because of family pressure, but because you actually wanted them." Emily turned to face him in the darkness. "I always thought I would someday, after I'd established my career, found the right partner. What about you?" "I always said I wouldn't, that I'd be a terrible father because I had no good examples to follow. And now?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "Now, I think maybe I could learn, if I had the right partner to teach me. We have time to figure it out. Do we? The contract says 8 months left, and then the contract is irrelevant now, unless you still want me to leave at the end of the year." "God, no, I want—" Nathan paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I want this to be real. Fully, completely real. No end date, no arrangement, just us." Emily's heart swelled. "Then let's make it real." The next day, Nathan had his lawyers draft papers officially voiding their original contract and replacing it with something much simpler, a post-nuptial agreement that treated their marriage as a genuine partnership. When Emily signed the new papers, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "Now it's official," Nathan said, pulling her close. "You're stuck with me permanently." "Good, because I wasn't planning on going anywhere." Their newfound happiness was almost perfect, but Marcus remained a lurking threat. He'd been gathering evidence, questioning staff members, trying to prove that their marriage had started as a fraud. At a family dinner 2 weeks later, he finally made his move. "I think we should all toast the happy couple," Marcus announced, standing with his wine glass raised. "Nathan and Emily, who managed to fall in love in exactly 3 days, right before grandmother's marriage deadline. Such convenient timing." The table went silent. Margaret's eyes narrowed dangerously, but before she could speak, Nathan stood. "You're right, Marcus. The timing was convenient. Emily and I did meet because of the deadline, and yes, I initially approached her as a business arrangement." Emily's heart stopped. Nathan was admitting the truth, exposing their deception in front of his entire family. "But what started as convenience became the most important thing in my life," Nathan continued, his eyes finding Emily's. "I hired someone to play a role and ended up falling completely in love with the woman behind the performance. So yes, our marriage started unconventionally. But what it's become is more real than any relationship I've ever had." Marcus sputtered, clearly not expecting such honest admission. You're saying you committed fraud to secure your inheritance. I'm saying I made a business decision that led to genuine love, and I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Margaret stood, her expression fierce despite her fragile health. Marcus, that's enough. I've known about their arrangement from the beginning. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Nathan turned to his grandmother in surprise. You knew? Of course I knew. You think I'm senile? I have investigators, dear boy. I knew within a week. Margaret smiled at Emily warmly. But I also saw what you two were too stubborn to see yourselves. The arrangement was temporary, but the connection was real from the start. I just had to give you time to figure it out. Emily felt tears spring to her eyes. You were testing us? I was hoping for you, and I was right to hope. Marcus tried to argue further, but the rest of the family rallied around Nathan and Emily, charmed by the story of an arrangement that became real love. By the end of the evening, what could have been a disaster had instead become a celebration of their unconventional journey. In the car ride home, Emily couldn't stop smiling. Your grandmother is diabolical. She's always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It's infuriating and wonderful. I can't believe she knew the whole time. Nathan pulled into their building's garage and turned to face Emily. Are you okay with all of this? With everyone knowing the truth about how we started? I'm more than okay. No more secrets, no more pretending. Just us, exactly as we are. Exactly as we are, Nathan repeated. He leaned across the console to kiss her softly. Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in the last hour. I was starting to worry. I love you, Emily Sterling. I love your smart mouth and your brilliant mind and the way you see the best in me, even when I can't see it myself. I love you too, even though you're stubborn and controlling and completely impossible sometimes. Especially because I'm stubborn and controlling and impossible. Especially because of that. 6 months later, Emily stood in front of a room full of investors and city officials, presenting her community center design. Sterling International had agreed to fund the project as part of their social responsibility initiative. But Emily had insisted on pitching it herself, on proving that she'd earned the opportunity through merit rather than marriage. The goal is to create a space that serves multiple functions, she explained, walking them through her renderings. Educational support, recreational facilities, health services, and community gathering spaces, all designed to be accessible and welcoming. Nathan watched from the back of the room, his pride evident despite his attempts to maintain professional neutrality. When Emily finished her presentation to enthusiastic applause, he couldn't stop himself from grinning. The project was approved unanimously. As Emily gathered her materials after the meeting, Nathan approached with an expression of pure joy. You were brilliant, he said, pulling her into a hug despite their professional setting. I was nervous. You were perfect, and this project is going to change lives. Our project, Sterling International, is making this possible. Your vision, your design, your passion. We're just providing the resources. Emily looked up at him, this man who'd started as a convenient solution to financial problems and become her entire world. Thank you for believing in me, for supporting my dreams, for being patient while I figured out what I wanted. Thank you for walking into my office that day, for agreeing to something insane, for loving me despite all the very good reasons not to. They stood there in the empty conference room, holding each other, both marveling at how far they'd come from that first confused meeting. That evening, they celebrated with dinner at the restaurant, where Nathan had taken Emily on their first public appearance as a couple. So much had changed since that awkward evening when they'd been strangers playing roles. Do you ever regret it? Nathan asked over dessert. The way we started, the arrangement, all of it? Emily considered the question carefully. I regret that I had to be desperate enough to agree to marry a stranger. I regret that financial pressure pushed me into such a risky situation. But I don't regret meeting you, falling for you, or building this life we have. The circumstances were wrong, but the outcome is perfect. Even though I'm still stubborn and controlling? Even though you're still stubborn and controlling, someone has to keep your ego in check. Nathan laughed, reaching across the table to take her hand. I have something for you. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Emily's breath caught. Nathan, we're already married. I know, but I never properly proposed. Never gave you a choice or a romantic moment, or any of the things you deserved. I want to fix that. He opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, far more beautiful than the practical band she'd been wearing. Emily Sterling, will you marry me? Not for business or convenience or financial security, but because I love you and want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Tears streamed down Emily's face. We're already married, you ridiculous man. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Yes, I'll marry you for real, with my whole heart. Nathan slipped the new ring onto her finger, and Emily couldn't stop staring at it, at this symbol of how their relationship had transformed. When should we have the real wedding? Nathan asked. Grandmother would love to plan something elaborate. Or we could keep the wedding we already had and just rewrite the meaning. Every moment of that day, every vow, every kiss, it all means something different now. Something better. Nathan smiled, that soft expression he reserved only for her. I like that. Rewriting the meaning of what we already built. That's what we've been doing all along, taking something that started as a business arrangement and transforming it into a real partnership. The best business decision I ever made. The worst business decision. It completely violated standard practices, ethical guidelines, and common sense. But the best life decision. The best life decision, Emily agreed. They finished dinner and walked through the city hand in hand, talking about the community center project, about Margaret's improving health, about their future plans. When they finally returned to the penthouse that had once felt like a gilded cage and now felt like home, Emily realized something important. Nathan? Yes? I'm happy. Not because of the money or the opportunities or the successful career I'm building. I'm happy because I'm with you, and that's all I need. Nathan pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I spent 32 years thinking happiness was something other people felt, something I wasn't capable of. Then you stumbled into my office and changed everything. I didn't stumble. I walked confidently into the wrong room. The right room, as it turns out. The exact right room at the exact right time. They stood in the darkness of their bedroom, holding each other, both grateful for the series of mistakes and coincidences that had brought them together. The contract that had started their relationship was void now, replaced by something that no legal document could ever capture. Genuine love, hard-won trust, and a partnership built on mutual respect and affection. I love you, Emily whispered. I love you too. Forever. Not just for one contractual year. Forever sounds perfect. Outside, the city sparkled with lights and possibilities. Inside, two people who'd started as strangers in a business arrangement had become partners in every sense of the word. Their story hadn't begun with love, but it had led there anyway, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected circumstances. And as they fell asleep in each other's arms, Emily thought about the terrified girl who'd walked into Nathan Sterling's office all those months ago, desperate for any opportunity to survive. That girl had been looking for a job and found her soulmate instead. Sometimes the wrong contract turned out to be exactly right. Before you go, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments below, and let us know what city you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.